Um, I would like to turn our attention now to part two, the Marie Skłodowska-Curie fellowships. And without further ado, Jackson, I think you're going to just jump into that.
Thank you. So you may know these by their sort of common name or the older official name, the Marie Curies. The updated formal name is the Marie Skłodowska-Curie Actions to honor the Polish heritage of this two-time prize winner here. So these are, just like I was saying before about the overall spirit of Pillar One in Horizon Europe, opportunities for researcher career development at all stages. When I say all stages, I mean for a PhD holder, and they like to call out the three I's, which is the top right square here. There has to be an international, intersectoral, and interdisciplinary aspect to most or all of these projects. So again, this isn't for you to stay in the country you are and just get some more funding to stay put. This really is to enhance your career by throwing yourself in a new situation, and interdisciplinary is rewarded. This budget comes to about 7.5 billion US dollars over the course of 7 years, so over $1 billion per year. Of course, this is over the whole entire set of five schemes, which again, in the interest of time, I'm going to go through fairly quickly. There are five schemes total. For a North American audience, I really only think these top three in a short time frame deserve a lot of extra elaboration. So I will be talking about doctoral networks, postdoctoral fellowships, and staff exchanges, and which one might be of interest or relevant to you will depend on sort of your profile. So for doctoral networks, these are, contrary to what I said before, not for the individual researcher to apply to. This is for a consortium of universities or institutions to apply to, basically saying, hello, European Commission, we have this common theme we want to carry out. We propose, let's say, Harvard, MIT, and then two universities, or three universities rather, in Europe. We will all carry out this joint or connected PhD program. We'll all have X number of vacancies. Can you please fund this? And everyone goes to the institution they want by finding on your EURAXESS portal and applying. It's hard to maybe give a 30-second pitch to this, and I'm going to do the best I can. But essentially, is the individual researcher, you would simply be going to the EURAXESS website, clicking funding source, and you would see, oh, this is the PhD opportunity in this university in this country, and that opportunity itself is funded from the doctoral network. So I would say if you're a prospective PhD, hop on EURAXESS and just type in doctoral networks. You'll see a list of successful consortia that have received funding to carry out some project. And it's not just that individual PhD research opportunity is interlinked with the other institutions there. Unfortunately for US and Canadian institutions, my two priority countries here for my continent, they have to fund their own way. This is not the case in lower middle income countries or in any of those 45 countries you saw earlier that are fully in Horizon Europe. So I think the pitch here is that you unlock, again, a lot of great partnerships. But that said, regardless of your nationality and where you're based now, look for doctoral network funded PhD opportunities if you're a prospective PhD. Where I think we get the most interest in numbers, definitely in this 2025 round, shot up. In the US, I think it went up 200%. I'll find the exact figures, but maybe to the surprise of very few. This is for an individual postdoctoral research prospective postdoc to apply directly to the EU, so not like consortia of universities in the previous example. And you apply with a letter of support from your prospective host institution. So you say, I want to go to this university, be supervised by this PI or this person. And if you are a person of any nationality wanting to go to Europe, and this includes moving within Europe, so you could be in Spain, moving to Switzerland, or at MIT looking to wrap up a PhD and then do a postdoc in Switzerland, you only need that letter of support from your European institution. If you're a European citizen or long-term resident of Europe, you can go from Europe anywhere in the world. So this is where if you're Harvard, MIT, any North American faculty, and you would like to serve as a supervisor and have this postdoc under you where you don't have to pay them, it's going to come from the EU, simply post your hosting offer on the EURAXESS portal. Again, that's completely free. You really can't. We've hosted sessions specifically on this postdoctoral fellowship. You know, the length of this 90-minute webinar with you today, we'll do the exact same thing, only talking about this mobility scheme. And we like to have testimonials from current fellows themselves and from their supervisors. And the resounding sort of takeaway is that if you're a prospective supervisor, please don't think this is just a way to get a free postdoc you can put to work as you wish. This is really focused on the research proposal of that individual applicant, which is why having an accurate and sort of detailed description of who you would like to host is a great thing because when that very organic match comes through, rising tide lifts all boats. You don't have, you get a free postdoc because it's being paid by the EU, and that person has the independence and autonomy to carry out under you that project that they want. In this case, because this is the bottom of the two examples that you see here, this is the global fellowship. They can come to Harvard, MIT, any country they want in the world for 1 to 2 years, but then they have to do a mandatory 1 year return phase to Europe. The idea, so you can't really use it as a backdoor way to recruit someone and then say, thanks for your 1 or 2 years under this scheme. Now stay here forever. They have to go back to Europe to finish it. And in this case, they'll need a letter of support from both institutions. So let's say Harvard MIT supervisor, and then whatever European post-institute supervisor they have. And in this case, it's interconnected. It's all the same project. So it's 1 to 2 years plus that 1 year in Europe. We have one more slide on this. So I think I've laid it out, but maybe visually it's a little bit easier to understand. Again, you can go from anywhere in the world to any of those 45 plus countries you saw earlier, basically Europe and the wider neighborhood, including countries like Turkey and Tunisia. And then global fellowship, the European citizens and long-term residents can go anywhere they want, but they have to go back to Europe. There's also an optional half-year secondment that can be non-academic if you so wish. So the eligibility requirements, this is maybe, I'll say it quickly, but this is really the most useful thing to know because it's a very popular scheme. You have to be 0 to 8 years post PhD, but this is counting experience, not exact number of calendar days. So if you took parental leave, if you are from a country where you had obligatory national service, if you simply were not working with sort of equivalent research experience in your field, there are ways to calculate that irrelevant or not time out. And if you get down to 8 years, then you're in that eligibility window. They count this, it's by the application deadline, you have to have defended your PhD. In past year, if you ever look at past info sessions we've held or tips and tricks webinars, I mean, these go back years, the best practices, and we have a lot of great webinars, but every year there's very small changes to what are called the work program, the sort of the legal requirements. For example, the number of pages of each document you submit. And the system, for example, just to go on a small tangent that might save a person or two, it will not warn you if let's just say the requirement for section B is a 5-page document. If you submit 6, it'll say thank you for your upload, and you'll be none the wiser. So please pay very close attention to these requirements. Also, when you have the deadline, unless otherwise noted, it's at 5 p.m. Brussels time. So please factor in that for most of the year, 6-hour difference on the East Coast of the US. It's not an 11:59 p.m. Eastern or Western time in the Americas situation. I hope you're not waiting till the last day. I know it's always nice to go in and make some updates. One thing that's been recommended as the best practice among European NCPs is they're always saving the last version of your proposal when you're submitting it on the Funding and Tender Opportunities portal. So please, in the days and weeks before, have your best, most complete final version, and then you can always go through and tweak. And if you're doing some last minute edit and it doesn't get saved for whatever technical reason, the previously saved version is still there, and that's what's automatically submitted at the cutoff. If you're in a very strange situation where the EU website itself goes down and you can document that, please contact the IT team for the Funding and Tenders Opportunity portal, and they'll work to accommodate you in that case. But that's very rare, so please be prepared. There's also a mobility rule that I want to spend a moment on. You cannot have spent more than 1 year in the last 3 in the country that you're planning on going to. So if you are currently in the US, wanting to stay in the US, you can't simply hop back to Europe and then say, I'm a European, let me switch from Harvard to MIT. They're going to look back at the last 3 years, and you cannot have been here more than 12 months in that 3-year period. There's also something called, you get a score, and you cannot resubmit if your score is below that 70% threshold. However, there's something else called an MCA Seal of Excellence. It kind of goes in the opposite direction here. If you got a very high score, but the amount of money awarded sort of exhausts itself before they get down to you, you get what's called an MSCA Seal of Excellence, and individual countries will say, hey, you didn't get this pan-European funding to go to the host institute you wanted. We would love you to carry out your project in our country. So please pick a university. We're going to provide that funding. So also, when you're looking at statistics, these are all very competitive, under 20% success rate. Please be aware that even not being immediately successful can still yield the results you want. So you might want to look into that MSCA Seal of Excellence.
If you don't mind, Jackson, we just have a quick clarifying question
Yeah.
that I think is important for everybody to understand. Our poster was confused and asks, so the European institutions, the ones who are hosting the postdocs, or can postdocs create their opportunity by contacting an institution and supervisor?
Ah, the latter. So you
Yeah.
are applying to the EU saying, this is specifically the bottom-up project I'm proposing to carry out. This is the institution I want to go to, and this is the supervisor that I want to research under. Um, exactly that. So you can obviously just cold call. You can contact any prospective supervisor and say, in Europe, they're generally familiar with this too. And even if that individual faculty member, supervisor is not familiar, the wider office, funding office is aware. Um, but exactly that. So that's why I'm encouraging, regardless of which side of the pond you're on, if you would like to host a postdoc, to post that hosting off of the EURAXESS portal, because that's where Europeans in particular who want to go outside of Europe, that's the first place they're looking. But I'm sorry that wasn't clear.
Great. Thank you so much.
So I do have some hard numbers here. I'm again looking at the clock, so we'll see in the Q&A if I'm getting to this in time, maybe if this deserves more time. These are the monthly costs or the monthly allowances associated with the scheme. These are all five of these are monthly. These are basically in euro set to Belgium, just because that's where the EU is headquartered. So every single country has something where you apply what's called the country correction coefficient. More or less, the EU looks at the inflation, cost of living, et cetera, and says every country you adjust by a certain percentage against Belgium. So in the US, so this would be for example, a European who wanted to be hosted at Harvard or MIT. They would increase that Belgian rate by 69.4%, just because of differences, again, in cost of living and whatnot, and then converting to US dollars. And this would be the amount, that column, the leftmost column, are the three monthly allowances, pre-tax, of course. So this obviously is a very nice, big, generous number. The EU cannot tell you about the Massachusetts tax situation, any local taxes. So please consult with the office of your prospective host institution. And then these would be the institutional costs as well that your host institute would be getting to cover you and your research project. They're very generous, but I also just want to say, because of the tax situation really differing country to country and the practices of each institution for how they dole it out, I don't want to say that I know exactly what it's like in every scenario. That said, when you are a fellow, you get to be a part of a great community called the Marie Curie Alumni Association, and they have local chapters. And just a few months ago, they actually branched off from having a North America wide chapter, having specific US and Canada chapters. So this can be where you can connect and bond with other current fellows and alumni alike. Even though it's called an alumni association, it's also for current fellows. So it's where you can immediately plug into a community of people like you who are funded by the EU, and you also have networking opportunities amongst yourselves. So I thought I might as well take this table and put it back in the other direction. So we can, for example, it's the same currency, Italy and Belgium and most of Europe. So we just simply modify down 4.7% the Belgian rate to get what you would be getting in Italy. And I rounded to the nearest 10 euro just to make these numbers simple and clean. But to give you an example, so you would be going to what's called the work program, this hundreds page long PDF describing all of the formal definitions of the MSCA. And then you would go to the very last page and you would have the CCC list, and every single country in the world's listed. So you can find any country you're interested in, and find out how much money you would be getting, pre-tax, of course. And I think I'll start rounding off here by talking about staff exchanges. Again, this is not funded for US or Canadian based entities, but this is for institutions to come together and say, because of this intersectoral and international dynamic, we want to second staff to each other to all learn from each other. But all those European countries are funded. So this can be, if you're on the administrative or leadership side, where you might see value as a North American entity to say, okay, we can put a little bit of money in, knowing all of our European friends and international friends from low and middle income countries will be funded automatically, and we all benefit from this sort of exchange and training of staff. But for the individual researchers here today, which I think is the majority, it's not relevant, so that's why I'll go through quickly. All of these calls are closed, but I just want to let you know what the most recent call calendar was, so you can guesstimate to the best of our abilities next year. These really tend to not change more than a week or two in either direction. So let's take a look at the most famous one, the postdoctoral fellowships. We can anticipate maybe around late April, early May, it will open, and then that mid to early September deadline of closing. But knowing this, I would say, if I'm sort of whetting your appetite, and this looks like it might be the scheme for you, start your outreach now, because by the time it opens, all of these prospective host institutes are going to be getting a deluge of also people reaching out. You don't have to wait till the opening. In fact, the work program itself lists everything you need to know. So as soon as that's formally published in the coming weeks or months, you'll be able to prepare. And in the meantime, please liaise with the European National Contact Points or NCPs for MSCA to ask your questions. When you know the country you think you want to go to, find the NCP in that country. I'll help you find it, but it's publicly available. And then ask them your questions. And we at EURAXESS North America host a lot of webinars specific on MSCA. For example, a month and a half ago, we hosted with EURAXESS Poland, the Embassy of Poland in the United States, and then the Polish National Funding Agency, an information session specifically on the postdoctoral fellowships. And they talked about, of course, why you should consider the country. And it's a great research destination, but then also general tips and tricks that will be applicable and helpful regardless of where you might choose to apply. So you'll see here, half of the vacancies on these schemes, again, by mandate, will show up on the EURAXESS portal. So this will be a clickable link. And this is where you can, for example, if you're a prospective PhD, you can find any PhD opportunity that's funded by doctoral networks, knowing the intricacies of this scheme. I also want to just highlight the second bullet point here, the matchmaking platform. There's a project, an official EU project, kind of akin to EURAXESS. It's an information tool, and it's designed to help matchmake prospective applicants with prospective institutions. So, of course, the EURAXESS portal is a great starting point. Just reaching out, cold calling, cold emailing institutions in Europe that are doing the research you're interested in, but then add this to your toolbox too. Hop on that matchmaking platform, asynchronous. You can just introduce yourself, and then from there, reach other people or let them contact you. Just to illustrate here that the PDF will have a lot of resources and links you can click. I'll go through this slide here. I think I've done a little bit better on timing here. So I will let my host decide if I should go through the registration questions or if we have some burning live questions. But I think, Laura, I'm putting it in your hands right now. You tell me.
Thank you so much. I think that the questions that came in through the Q&A box are pretty quick. I think I'm just going to pose one from our guest, Luis, but I'll be emailing you all of his questions.
Great.
When is it possible for enthusiast participants to have dispositions for in-person participation in your EURAXESS conferences? I didn't quite get that question, but I thought you might understand it.
Yes. So anyone, for example, if you are, I'll try to take this in a wider sense, but if you are an EU-funded fellow, or you somehow have benefited from mobility that's EU funded, or you've done research in Europe, we're always happy to consider your involvement as a possible speaker at our events. That said, the main suite, the sort of usual suspects of speakers tend to be national contact points in Europe who are providing expertise on their country specifically, or just the scheme. Like I said before, we worked with MSCA NCPs in Poland, and we got the best of both worlds because they could talk about Poland, but also they just gave great tips on MSCA in general. We, as EURAXESS, manage our own social media channels. We're thankful for enthusiasm. I would say it doesn't make sense for us to necessarily have volunteers or do anything complimentary, but you're always welcome to tag us. And if we think it's relevant and wider, we're going to share this with the wider community. We do post in our bi-monthly flash notes, and I think the asker is a subscriber, so thank you again for your interest. And if we happen to be in your region, that's great because our participation is public and open. But that said, we specifically as North America are only in the US and Canada. So if you're in another continent, you might want to look to the EURAXESS team there. And again, we're all humble teams. I think the largest team is expanding to be 2.5 people soon, covering an entire continent. So we try to hit the ground running, do a lot of work. I would say to leverage this enthusiasm, you can also follow the social media accounts of all of these schemes themselves. The MSCA is on the major social media channels. The ERC, which is going to be my next half hour, is on the social media channels. And then the EU delegation in your country tends to be on social media, or at least have a newsletter. And the EU delegation, to sort of describe it in simple terms, is like the European Union embassy, but because the EU is not a country itself, it just isn't proper to call it a country. So a lot of the EU delegations will have what's called a science counselor. And this is a diplomat who specifically is from a scientific background or R&I background themselves. So they're not just diplomats who, are given a portfolio to study and train on. They tend to come from the research world, and they know R&I well. So in addition to us at EURAXESS, we rely on them. We need them as a crucial partner. So we liaise with them a lot. Maybe a partial answer to the question, but I think we've touched it. So I'll defer to you for the next one.
Yes, thank you. So these I think should be pretty quick. So is it possible for EU citizens completing a PhD in the US to apply for global fellowship?
Yes, your nationality and who issued your PhD doesn't matter. I presume it has to be an accredited institution. I'm sure I can find a legal answer there. But as long as you have defended your PhD successfully by the call close dates, you are eligible. 0 to 8 years post PhD equivalent work experience. So I'm sure there's some scenario where it was September 10th this year, I think. If you defended September 8th, but then it was not awarded till today, congratulations, you were eligible to apply, and you could have. But then again, yes, no, there's no restriction. It's completely open. I'll make it clear in future presentations because it's truly among the most open of all the programs. Mobility in both directions for all nationalities.
Great. Okay, and then part two of that was the European stint of a global fellowship. Is it possible to complete that as a faculty member?
Uh, this is where I'm going to ask this person to please email me.
Okay.
If I don't proactively email you, because maybe I can get a hard copy of these
Yeah.
from the Zoom
Yeah.
report.
Yeah.
And you can just copy and paste that exact same question. I'd like to loop in an NCP because basically, there's no age requirement. It's just the 8 years maximum equivalent work experience post PhD. As far as I understand, you would have your European supervisor. You would carry out your project. So maybe I'm not understanding the question fully. However, for this person, maybe I can entice you with ERC because in the next half hour you're going to learn about dual affiliation, and if Harvard or MIT will let you, you can have one foot on each continent.
Okay, great. And then really quick, is somebody with an MD degree, are they eligible to apply for the Marie Curie postdoc?
This is a great question. I should know this. I'm going to dig down and similarly to the previous question, check. For the most part, it's terminal degree in your field, but I don't want to guesstimate and promise something. So please message me North America at EURAXESS.net, and I'll connect you with a European ISP. Please just tell me what country do you like? And you don't have to do any, it's not official, it's nothing too on the record, and I'll contact the NCP in that country.
Okay, great. And I'll turn you back over to the other questions. We have
All right.
5 minutes or so.
Thank you. Um, the latest possible start date. So I do have a question here. I won't read verbatim because I think everyone can see it. So for example, I took a look on the EU website for the MSCA. The call closed September 10th. They normally, for every call period, they'll release the month they anticipate something will happen. So for this call that just closed, they expect to announce results in February of next year, and the start dates will tend to range from April to May. If there are certain circumstances where the normal time frame of waiting 2 to 3 months from being notified you were successful isn't going to work, uh, reach out to the commission. You're going to have your point of contact there. And I would say in general, there's a spirit of flexibility. I can't tell you that I know the maximum amount of time permissible. But for example, during COVID, there was a lot of flexibility. A lot of people who, had exhausted their time and their funding were told there's a global pandemic. We're just going to extraordinarily find the funding to allow everyone to stay at their institute if their institute will allow them to. And that way we don't have to have you cross borders during this chaotic time. So I think that serves as a very nice recent example of the overall spirit of flexibility. But in general, call closes September of every year. You're notified February of the following year, and then April to May is when you would typically be starting. And this is shortly after you sign the grant agreement. So once everyone's notified of results, shortly after February, you're in talks with your host institution to actually formally get the contract underway. I think maybe the second question is what we touched earlier. Also, the third, can you apply for a McCree while finishing a PhD, as long as the defense date is before the call closing date? Someone had asked about transparency and satisfaction with the participants. I would say in general, so I came from Chicago just under a month ago for the first North America-wide in-person meeting of fellows. It was really great. The head of the Marie Curie Alumni Association in Europe came and actually was a speaker. And in general, it was a really great, there's a great spirit of camaraderie and appreciation. Also, the Marie Curie Alumni Association is an independent entity. So they have a feedback mechanism where if the fellows are not happy, the EU can hear this in a very structured, official, formal way from the Alumni Association. So this is the subjective answer. I don't know that if it's even possible to give a formal objective answer, but in general, I think the fellows are very happy. It's also why I try to be very transparent about things like the funding amount. It's generous, but I can't tell you the tax situation without knowing, where you're going to go. So in general, it's seen as very prestigious. Again, the success rate's very low, so you're up against a lot of great competition. And I think the EU knows that this is one of the premier funding sources. So I would say two thumbs way up, but you'll have to decide for yourself. Someone asked us if there are changes to recent additions. Every year there's small changes. The Radiance project, all uppercase, if you just type Radiance MSCA, this is a successor to a project that was previously called MSCA Net. And these are essentially kind of like EURAXESS EU-funded official programs that provide information and support for the scheme. And they will typically release what they call a handbook. So if you type in MSCA handbook, it's considered unofficial because it's not released by the commission itself, but it's released by a project of the commission. So I think it's as close as you can get. And they'll have tips and tricks, information for applicants, but they'll also go through and explain what's different year to year. So if you're looking at a webinar that we hosted 2 months ago with our Polish friends talking about the most recent cycle, it might not necessarily apply next year. So do keep in mind those small changes year to year. And then someone asked if there's a direct PhD entry route into Europe. If I'm understanding correctly, and you're asking, how can I just do a PhD in Europe? I hope my earlier slides maybe answer this question, and that is find a vacancy on the EURAXESS portal. But of course, you don't need, it's not your only tool. Find any institution in Europe or the world that you like, and then look at their schemes. But the EU funded ones will be posted on EURAXESS, in addition to some that are not funded by the EU, but they just know it's a great place to post and get some extra clicks.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jackson. You powered right through those questions, and I am so grateful for you to have provided this amazing amount of information. Everybody will be getting the slides and the recording, and I'd like to turn it over to my awesome colleague, Alex Yen from MIT, to launch part 3 of this session.